Hey guys, this is Claire here from Living by Bike, and in today's video I'm going to tell you everything that you need to know before bikepacking across New Zealand. Now this title was a little bit of clickbait. I want to say right now that I am not an expert in bicycle touring across New Zealand. I literally just finished bikepacking there for just shy of 2 months, and I'm currently in Melbourne, staying in a friend's apartment, editing this video and making this video right now. But I did just bike around the entire country for just shy of 2 months, and I want to share with you everything that I learned. That way, if you're planning your own bicycle touring trip, you can take the knowledge that I have given to you to make your trip better for whatever you're looking forward to. Let's get started. First things first, the other disclaimer, this was my itinerary. I'm gonna have it on the screen somewhere for you to look at. I flew into Christchurch on December 14th, had about a week to get to Queenstown to celebrate Christmas in Queenstown. And then after that, my friend and I biked up the west coast of the country, cut central after Greymouth, and then took the ferry from Picton to Wellington. And then from Wellington, I biked straight up to Auckland. So I didn't get to do every single part of the country. I did get to do a lot. I was in a little bit of a time crunch. That was my itinerary, just to provide you a bit more context about when I was traveling, which was December 14th until February 8th, and also where I was traveling. Alrighty, information to know number one. There is a lack of ozone in New Zealand. You are going to want serious sun protection while you are biking across that country. I would recommend putting on sunscreen that is at least 50 SPF every hour that you're in the sun, like every single hour, do not miss it. Wear that sunscreen every hour that you're biking. And if you don't want to wear sunscreen because that gets a little bit annoying to have to reapply all the time, just get sun layers. You'll be very happy to have sun layers in New Zealand. No one wants skin cancer. You don't really want to get funky tan lines or get like painful burns. So please be aware, there is a lack of ozone in New Zealand. Actually, this should have been tip number one, that should have been tip number two. But the first thing to know is when you are entering New Zealand, assuming you are bringing your tent and your bike with you and any other outdoor gear, you need to clean it. New Zealand has a very strict biosecurity, and if you don't clean your stuff, that could result in a $400 fine. I literally heard a story of somebody who was flying into New Zealand, like they already lived there, but they were flying back from traveling, and they got a sandwich at the airport, and it was like a ham and cheese sandwich for like, $8 or whatever. And they fly into New Zealand and they forgot to finish the sandwich, and they didn't declare it while getting into the country, and they got the $400 fine. Clean your stuff before getting here. That's all I have to say. Clean your stuff to avoid the fine, and declare everything that you're bringing to New Zealand. Just don't bring any food really from the airport, but yes. Information number three, freedom camping. A lot of bicycle tourists like to do freedom camping, wild camping, whatever you want to call it. The main rule of thumb in New Zealand is that you can freedom camp everywhere except for where you can't freedom camp, which I know isn't particularly helpful because you're like, well, how do I know where I can and I can't freedom camp? You'll see signs posted that say no freedom camping. Another equivalent to that sign is something that says self-contained vehicles only. A self-contained vehicle is essentially a camper van that has a toilet in it. And tents do not have toilets in them. Your bike does not have a toilet in it. So unfortunately, you cannot go where it says self-contained vehicles only. New Zealand has had an unfortunate history of tourists who just kind of trash the place, and they'll just like take a dump in the woods and not bury it. The responsible traveler should know that if you're going to be out in the wilderness, you should bring a little, like I call it a pooper scooper, just like a little trowel to dig a hole in the ground and then take a dump in the ground and cover it. That's what like the responsible outdoorsy traveler does. But New Zealand has had, unfortunately, a lot of people who were not very respectful to the land. For freedom camping, just know that you can do it. Just avoid the touristy areas, avoid places that have strict like self-contained vehicles only. And also, if you want to check the map here, someone told me a map or an app to get, and it can tell you where you can and you can't freedom camp. And you can also, I'm gonna talk about these apps later, but you can also use the Campermate app to help you figure out where campgrounds are. Okay, number four, Kiwis are on holiday in December and January. A lot of people are traveling in December and January. Both international travelers like myself and then just Kiwis themselves have, I'm pretty sure that they have like general time off from work, and then people might tack on additional like time off from work to go hike Abel Tasman or do whatever it is that they want to do. But places will be crowded. It will be a bit crowded in December and January. Campgrounds will have a lot of people. You'll probably have to book your hostels ahead of time. I would say most of my hostels I had to book like a few days in advance. It wasn't really realistic to just roll up the day of. Everyone's traveling, which is both a great thing and an annoying thing for the exact reason of places get booked up and it gets really crowded, but also you get to meet so many more people. I've met so many lovely and amazing people at campgrounds and at hostels on this trip, so take with that what you will. Also, if you are looking for hosts on the Warm Showers website, for me, most of them were traveling. So I actually got declined a lot of people from Warm Showers because literally they were always traveling. And there also aren't that many Warm Showers hosts in New Zealand. There's also couch surfing, but a lot of people are traveling is what I'm trying to say. There's gonna be more traffic on the roads, fewer hosts available, and you're gonna have to plan things a little bit more in advance if you want to be inside for the night. Number 5, maybe this is me and just my American hubris or American ignorance or whatever, but I feel like on the maps New Zealand always looks really small, but it's actually quite a long country. It is like the length of basically Georgia to like New England in the United States. It's quite large. So the reason why I mention this is how long should you spend biking across New Zealand? I spent just shy of 2 months and I did miss out on a lot of things. I didn't get to go to Milford Sound. I didn't get to go to Cape Reinga at the very top of New Zealand. I didn't get to see any volcanoes. I wish I could have done glacier hikes, but I didn't get to do the main glacier hikes. I only did the short ones. I would say if you want to get like the full experience of New Zealand, if you want to go there and see everything, I would say you need at least 3 months to do it. If you're gonna do less than 2 months like myself, you're gonna miss out on some beautiful parts. New Zealand's pretty large and the terrain can be challenging at times. So I'd recommend spending 3 months biking across New Zealand. Again, that's if you want to do the South Island and the North Island and really take the time to savor everything that you're doing. Like there's just so much to see and so much to do. Like there's just so much. So more time is better than less time in New Zealand is essentially what I have to say. Number 6. So the terrain that you'll be biking on is, well, New Zealand is largely known for its mountain biking trails. And I mean, there's different gradings for all of them, but I think a lot of them are on 1 to 5, at least on the Great Rides app, they're 1 to 5. I had a no suspension bike. I had a hardtail bike, and it was a really hefty gravel bike. I don't do a lot of mountain biking at home, so I didn't want to get a mountain bike, but if you're going to go with no suspension, I'd recommend not going past a 3. Like maybe you can do a 4 if you have great technical ability and you don't have a lot of stuff on you. But New Zealand is known for its mountain biking, and that's where most of the beauty is. And then if you're not on those bike trails, you're gonna be on the interstate roads. When you are bicycle touring across New Zealand, you're gonna get a really good mix of interstate roads where you're just on the pavement and you're next to cars versus the gravel and the mountain biking paths, which bring you more into nature, which are away from cars, but also can be quite treacherous because the terrain can be quite challenging. Depending on what kind of biking you want to do, you know, get the bike and plan your trip around that. I know there are some people who just take a bus from place to place just to do the really nice biking route because they cannot be bothered to bike on the interstate roads to get from one place to another. The terrain is essentially pretty well-paved interstate roads or the bike paths. So if you want to see all of the beautiful nature, I'd recommend touring New Zealand not on a road bike, just because the road bike will be a little bit limiting. Going off of that point, tip number 7, information number 7, whatever you want to call it, there aren't very many trains in New Zealand. So if you need to get from one place to another because you're having a mechanical issue or you're tired or you want to skip a section, you're going to be taking a bus. The intercity buses, and you're supposed to break down your bike partially. I don't think you have to put it into a bike box, but unless you want to pay the $10 fee to put it on the bus, that's just what your option is for getting from place to place in New Zealand if you don't want to bike a certain section of it. For example, I was doing the Alps to Ocean with Jima and their spoke broke, and we finished the ride for the day because you can manage without a broken spoke for a short amount of time. But they had to miss out on the rest of the Alps to Ocean Trail because there were no bike shops in the area. So they took a bus to Queenstown, which ended up being a totally fine experience. I know that Jima also took a bus from Nelson to Picton because he didn't want to bike that route because he just didn't want to. So anyways, That's the other option. And tacking onto that sub point of number 7, I guess you could call it a 7B or something like that, hitchhiking is also a thing in New Zealand. So I had many people tell me this, there's just like a pretty good hitchhiking culture in New Zealand. Take with that what you will, you know, do whatever you feel comfortable doing. I hitchhiked once and it wasn't even real. It was just to get from the city of Nelson to the outer suburbs to get back to my host. But I had lots of people at my hostels or even on my rides offer to drive me places. So I found the people very generous in this transportation and kind of carpooling. And I'm sure you could also just like, you know, have you and your bike on the side of the road and be saying like, hey, I need a ride. I'm sure, you know, having a bike will make it a little bit harder to hitchhike, but those are your two options essentially for getting from place to place if you can't bike. It's the bus and it's hitchhiking. In terms of planning your bike route, this is number 8. The Te Araroa, I have a lot of difficulty pronouncing the names in New Zealand. The TA is the most popular one that they do to guide themselves across New Zealand. You're not married to it, you'll probably get asked a lot if you are doing the TA. Obviously, do whatever you want, like you're not married to it. There are certain sections that I didn't do. For example, I didn't bike the bridge to nowhere because when I had gotten there at the ferry, the other people who had come in the opposite direction looked like they had just come from war, they were covered in mud, and they said it was the worst thing ever because the conditions were just really bad because of the weather. So we just went on the highway that day, which was totally fine. But the TA is the biggest bikepacking route in New Zealand, and if you're looking for a guiding route, that would be a good one. In general though, New Zealand I think is pretty bikeable if you're okay with the interstate roads. So again, you can do whatever you want, and you can also check out the other really cool biking routes on the Great Rides app. Number 9, going off of that, the apps that I mentioned. The first one I mentioned earlier in this video was the Campermate app. That one is super handy. Like you definitely need to download that one. Fundamentally download the Campermate app. It is free and it tells you all the camping nearby, and it tells you like the freedom camping, or it tells you the self-contained vehicle camping versus like regular camping versus holiday parks, and then the dock campgrounds, which I'll explain in the next one. Campermate is amazing. It also tells you public water fountains. It tells you about bathrooms nearby and toilets. It is such a good resource. So use the Campermate app. The Great Rides app, like I mentioned, that just kind of outlines a bunch of the really wonderful bike routes in New Zealand. There are plenty more beautiful bike routes in New Zealand that aren't on the app, but that one is a big one. My personal favorites, in case you're curious, was the West Coast Wilderness Trail, the part of the Alps to Ocean, which included Lake Ohau in the Benmore Peninsula. That was so gorgeous. And then the third one was the Timber Trail in the North Island. Those are my top 3 favorites. I guess for the fourth one you could say biking from Wanaka to Lake Hawea, but that was really short. But Great Rides app is wonderful for knowing about a lot of the beautiful bike rides in New Zealand. Another one that we used was called Kiwi Camper. That's what Jima downloaded it, and I think it was like Campermate, but I think it had more options for lodging. Like it included hostels and hotels. I mean, I just used Hostel World to find that, but Kiwi Camper was the other one that was pretty helpful. Number 10, dock campgrounds. So dock campgrounds are littered across the South Island. Well, maybe littered is a little bit too generous, but there's a lot of dock campgrounds in the South Island. They just have water and toilets and maybe a couple of tables, and that's about it. They will fill up, and most of them you don't have to reserve online. Most of them you can just kind of roll up and park your tent there. And you can just put in your cash into the little like stand and just write your name on your bike, or they have like these little tags, but you can just pay when you get there with cash, which is totally fine. And some of them do say that you need to be reserved, but from what I realized, like as long as you're not in one of the reserved spots and maybe you're just on like the giant patch of grass in the middle or something like that, nobody really cares if you're there, if it's like booked out or whatever. I think that's only important if you are in Abel Tasman. Like if you're in Abel Tasman, you really need to reserve your spots there. The dock campgrounds were amazing for camping, would definitely recommend. If you want to drink the water without filtering it, that's your own choice. I have to filter it because I have a sensitive stomach for IBS, but the water at the dock campgrounds is usually fine to not drink, so do with that what you will. 10 or 11, I'm not sure what number I'm on. There are not a lot of bike shops in the South Island, so bring extra tools with you, bring extra parts, and make sure your bike is ready for the South Island. Bring an extra chain if you think you need it. Bring an extra spoke if you think you need it, maybe even an extra cable. I mean, like I said earlier, Jima's spoke broke and he just took the bus to get to the next destination, but he had to miss out on like a lot of biking because of it. Just make sure your bike is prepared. Make sure your bike is ready for the terrain in New Zealand. And if it's not, make sure you have some knowledge about how to replace certain parts. So if you are on the side of the road, you can do it yourself because you might not have a shop near you. And it's no fun to have to miss out on cool parts of the ride or being stranded in the middle of nowhere. The next thing is sandflies. If you're going on the west coast of New Zealand, I think we're on number 12 right now, is sandflies. They will bite you and they are annoying. You're gonna wanna get repellent for the sandflies. Small but important, be aware of them. Number 13, most people bike New Zealand north to south is what I realized. We did it mostly south to north. I don't know if that's actually important for you to know. It was actually kind of nice going the opposite direction because I did lose a couple of things on the trail and I was able to meet up with other cyclists who were able to mail it to me later on. But that's just what typically people do, is they go north to south. Number 14, the weather. New Zealand gets a lot of weather, okay? There's a large variety of weather in New Zealand. You're gonna have some windy ass days. I can think of when I was biking from Christchurch to Rakaia Gorge on day 1, and we're just bombarded with the most intense headwinds ever. Well, not as bad as when I biked across the US this summer, but some really intense, some really severe headwinds. You're also gonna get rain in the South Island, and it's gonna be cold some nights, and then it's gonna be really hot some other days. So just make sure you have a lot of weatherproof clothing. You're gonna probably want thermals. Even though it was summer in New Zealand, it does get cold in the South Island. It really does. I had some thermal pants and a thermal jacket, and that was sufficient for what I needed. And then I had a rain jacket and I had rain pants. I ended up not needing to wear the rain pants because it usually was warm enough. Yeah, it was usually warm enough to get your legs wet and not need the rain pants. Be prepared for the weather in New Zealand. It's not gonna just be like hot and sunny all the time because it's summer. You're gonna get wind, you're gonna get cold, and you're not gonna want to be without the gear that you need. And I think that's pretty much everything that I can think of about what is important to know about biking across New Zealand. I found the Kiwis, the people in New Zealand, and also the travelers, just the travelers that this country attracts, are all so down to earth, so genuine, so kind. I only had 1.5 negative experiences. Well, I should say I only had 2.5 negative experiences with people on this bike trip, and I think that's saying a lot about a country when you're there for almost 2 months. The people were really wonderful. There is so much to see, so much to do. The South Island is really where a lot of the natural beauty is concentrated, although there is beauty everywhere in New Zealand. So if you have anything else to add about biking across New Zealand, please put it in the comments below. I tried to keep this video not too long because I just want to highlight the most important details about biking across New Zealand. There is so much more that I could say to inform you about the country. Things such as like little tidbits about the history from podcasts I was listening to, or information about the Maori culture, or things like pronunciation. But for just generally biking across the country, you can learn that along the way. All I have to say is New Zealand was amazing for bicycle touring. It is challenging, it can be treacherous at times, but pretty much every challenge was worth it. And I would highly recommend going out there for a long time. You don't want to rush yourself. I was a little bit rushed, but it's okay, life happens. Get out there, get dirty, breathe in the fresh air, get that sunshine, make friends, and talk to the locals. Talk to the locals, they're really quite wonderful. That's everything for this video. Please comment below if you have any more information about biking across New Zealand that I didn't touch on here. Again, I've only biked New Zealand once. I would definitely do it again. I missed out on some parts and I really want to do some more of it, but add that below. Also, I'm going to say this now as like a little extra thing that I forgot. The Big River Trail from Ikamatua to Reefton is hectic. It is very intense. It is advanced mountain biking, and I would not recommend it for bicycle tourists. It is very difficult when you do that trail with all of your bags on your ride. There was another one that I'm forgetting the name of, but I'll include it here, where I was kind of told the same thing. It is a wonderful and beautiful mountain biking trail, but it is really hard to do when you have all of your bags on your bike. So anyways, just depending on what kind of bike you have, double check the terrain before going on it, because there's some serious mountain biking in New Zealand, and the mountain biking is beautiful, but it's not always suited for bicycle touring because you usually have a lot of weight on you. Thank you for watching, and if you'd like to support me on more of my journeys, and as I'm growing this channel and trying to bring more people into the biking world, into the travel world, please like, comment, subscribe to this channel. You can check out my Instagram. The Instagram is where I'm most active. And also I'm starting a little website. So I'm hoping to write more intersectional pieces about bike packing on this instead of just things like gear. So you can also check out my website for some more information about other miscellaneous topics around bicycle touring. So thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day and happy riding.